Chapter 311. Reporting. Dominic smiled as he heard Millie giggle. She loved coffee, and she had planted many plants along the outer walls so that she would have a constant supply. Have you been informed of the situation here, with the Skipple-trained mages leading monster attacks? Alexis asked as she sat across from her brother. Prince Russell frowned. We heard rumors that there were still forces of monsters waiting here for someone to lead them. But you say that there are mages, and you know where they're from? She frowned. That should have been highlighted in the messages. Yes, we identified the location where all the mages were trained. But we suspect that they are a rogue faction that has broken off from the Skipple Royal Academy's mage sect. They were all carrying the markers of the Academy's mages, but they were not new, and we have confirmed through personal effects that one of the infiltrators was an elder from the Academy. Alexis took out the elder's signature coin purse, as well as his emblem as an elder. Well, that is pretty damning. Did they all have the same pouches? Those are given to both students and graduates, but the spells are faded from these, so I can't tell which they were. Russell commented. There should have been magic on them other than the storage effect. Alexis asked. Prince Russell nodded. Indeed. There should be an individual spell that identifies the owner so that it's impossible to claim that someone else's belongings are yours. You see, it's not impossible for a highly skilled mage to brute force their way through an attuned items bond to access the interior of a storage item. It's just not easy, and it usually destroys the item. So, to prevent theft, academies and sects mark them with a spell that identifies the owner more easily than running an attunement test. Then it's possible that these were actually taken from mages that they killed and robbed? It seems unlikely, given that it was two separate incidents, but there is no directly linking them to the mages now that they're dead. Dominic realized. No, I can tell whether they were forcibly tampered with, and these weren't. So, either the mage renounced their sect before being killed and broke the spell, or they were expelled from the sect, and the spell was removed by the caster. Though it is also possible that it might be that only the elder was ever a sect member, and he stole the rest to give to his subordinates. We won't know for certain until an investigation can be done. Prince Russell insisted. Alexis shrugged. You know that if someone comes asking, they'll just say that the elder and the others were expelled and have no affiliation. Whether it's true or not, that's the standard answer for a dead elder who is causing political problems. Even if they think that he's been captured alive, they will disavow him. They might even send one of their own to silence him on our behalf. And therein lies the problem. The king still thinks that the mages causing trouble with the monsters are aligned with the archmage. That may or may not be true, as the man himself hasn't been found. However, until he is, that operating theory won't change. Prince Russell insisted. Dominic shrugged. It's likely true. We've got a full report of the incident if you want to read it, but the elder was working for someone and mentioned a prince as a secondary boss. So it could be both the Archmage and Prince Kaizan that are sending monsters our way. Or worse, they might be sending them to Kainwin and Albrol's now that the civil war has officially started, and Signia is unlikely to get involved. The prince ran his fingers through his short hair and frowned. Well, if they're going that way, they're no longer our problem. There are military units with noble officers in control of the cities, and they can take care of themselves. For now, it's better that you worry about just what falls within the expanded realm of the duchy. For the next month, I will be here with my honor guard, and then I need to return home to my wife and children. Father had initially asked the soldiers to stay as well, but if the situation is stable, I will release them to return home. They're all reservists, not full-time soldiers. He stopped there, as both Dominic and Alexis would know what he meant. These men had lives waiting for them, and they weren't professional soldiers or adventurers. The sooner that they could get home, the happier they would be, and the better that the prince's territory would fare. After all, most of the reserves were sons of farmers, and they would be welcome additions back home when it was time to harvest. Dominic nodded in understanding. We won't keep you overly long, Your Highness. The duchy is already getting on its feet, and I have begun equipping the town guard with Magitech pistols for defense. Compared to a standard unit, pistols and spears with a short sword for backup is far more effective, and it will help even out the battlefield, despite our lacking numbers. The prince looked confused for a second, and then smiled. Right, you're the old dwarf's apprentice. The one who made the rifles for the natural sons. If you can equip the townsfolk with magitech weapons, or even just common-grade spears, they might as well be a militia of their own. Alexis smirked at her older brother. Forget such mundane expectations, brother. He's already begun passing out level 5 uncommon-grade spears to the farmers and magitech rifles to the huntsmen. Give us a few more months of training, and we will have a sharpshooter unit in behind a proper spear wall the next time that something comes at the village. It might not be as good as having your battle-hardened soldiers here, but it's more than most villages could claim. Chapter 312. Helping Hands. Prince Russell smiled at Alexis. Speaking of my soldiers, where do they go? Dominic gestured out the door. There is a barracks building in the compound, set up with multiple cots. They're setting up in the barracks, while our farrier checks over the horses. If there is anything else that they need, just tell the staff. But the barracks have all the essentials, including a stove to cook on, if they prefer to make their own meals. I know that Beth has dinner for everyone going. The prince turned to the kitchen. So, that's where the old woman went. I was told that she had left the service of the palace when I returned, but nobody thought to tell me that she had left to go work for the princess. She always did play favorites. Beth poked her head out of the kitchen to wave at the prince, who smiled and nodded at her. A moment later, a maid came in with a small plate containing a single square of brownie with chocolate syrup on top. The sight of it made Prince Russell laugh. See what I mean? The woman makes the most wonderful snacks, but when I want one, this is what I get. Meanwhile, my sisters would go in and come back with a whole bowl full of cake and ice cream. He explained as the plate was set in front of him. Alexis smirked. That's because princesses are meant to be pampered, but nobody likes a soft and idle prince. It's for your own good that she kept you all in shape. The prince took a small bite of the brownie, then gestured toward Dominic with a spoon. What are the chances that I can get a gear upgrade for my men before they start on patrols? We will be here a month, working to clear the area. I intend to route them on overnight trips so that they can reach more of the area, but they are a traditional unit. A few noble officers with rifles, but everyone else is working with common-grade swords and spears from the Royal Forge. If you've got higher-grade gear, I know that they would all appreciate it. It would also bring more of them home safely after we find the holdouts that are hiding around here. He asked. Dominic nodded. I don't have any right now, but I can make more. Spears are fastest, but I can make mana pistols fairly efficiently. Russell shook his head. The spears should be fine. I know that swords take time to forge, and these reserves are all drafted from my lands. None of them have ever handled a pistol before. We don't have time for weapons training. Good point. While I can make them a lot of weapons, your lads will be eager to get back home to their families and never have to swing a sword again in their lives. Dominic agreed. Well, that's the theory. But I suspect that it won't work out that way. Even when we get home, they're not being discharged. The threat of the Dago's civil war spreading across the border again is too high. But at least they'll get to be on guard from their own hometown, and they'll be earning pay while seeing their families. Prince Russell explained. Alexis tapped the table as she considered the situation. I would suggest that you take at least half the men in a single group when you're going south. You can send smaller units to scout north and ensure that everything is fine, but the risks to the south are much higher. Also, there is a village of trolls north of us. They're friendlies, so don't have your men attack them. Russell shot a suspicious look at Dominic, who shrugged. You're not wrong, it is my fault. But Wavemates has always been like that. I'm just bringing things back to how they have always been. Now that we have more territory, I suspect that we will be getting more requests for settlements from other demi-human groups. I'm not going to object to most of them, and then they can be folded into the oversight of whatever baron or other noble takes over the territory. The letter didn't say anything about more barons, but I suspect that there will be more than 20 under us eventually. Prince Russell shrugged. I doubt that the king expects this region to suddenly be densely populated. You have the first few barons very close by, but there is no harm in letting them settle into a role more like a border station. Some will prefer that independence, as it lets them work to impress the king on their own. But I would suggest that more strongly for the barons who have been elevated from the younger sons of higher peerages. The son of a duke or an earl, given a barony, is more likely to have the skills and connections needed to get a promotion within a single generation. Alexis winked at her brother. I guess that not everyone can expect a high position simply for the number of people they can kill. Prince Russell lifted his glass in a toast. I can't argue with that, Baroness. You probably have no idea the chaos that Duke Dominic's elevation made within the peerage and at the Assembly of Nobles. Going from untitled to duke is unprecedented, even if he was born a foreign prince and performed great deeds. Most war heroes are given the title of knight, or perhaps baronet. They aren't normally brought into the peerage at all, much less at the very top. It isn't my place to question the king's decision, but it is certainly controversial. It is working out in our favor, though. With the title of duke, it is clear that the king favors him and that there won't be any higher lord making rules for this region. It has attracted the majority of our residents. Now that we're getting set as a proper village, we will gather even more of the disillusioned from Stantia province, plus the refugees from Castle City and even Darden. The Merchants Guild has been recruiting skilled workers for our new factory. You'll love this. We're going to make Magitech lights and fireplace inserts. No more wood and coal cooking, no more dark nights. Alexis explained. And commoners living like minor nobles. No wonder they like you so much. Chapter 313. Factory Layout. After a light snack, the prince excused himself to go check on his soldiers, while Dominic went to see how Jasmine, the farrier, was doing with the horses. They had most likely not been well serviced since the war started, and if they had been ridden long distances on stone roads, the shoes would all be heavily worn. That would mean 400 shoes to replace, and that was more than a few days of work. My lord, good to see you out and about. I wasn't sure that you would make it back on time when we saw the convoy on the horizon. She greeted him, without slowing the steady hammering of her trade. She was reshaping a damaged leg plate, not a horseshoe, but for mechanical horses, that still fell to the farrier's duties. I just wanted to make sure that you had what you needed and that you didn't have to do 100 sets of shoes. Dominic joked. Jasmine shook her head. No, they were all replaced recently. Most likely by the royal farrier when they were in the capital. They'll be good for months still, unless they're marching on stone. Dominic shook his head. They're going to inspect the territory for us. The king has seen fit to expand the duchy, and they're here to make sure that it's not still inhabited by hostile Dago's forces. I don't know of any villages, but there might be some settled in further from us, and they will inform them of the change in leadership when they find them. And that means you're off to make more weapons. Jasmine realized. Predictable, right? Yes, I'm going to make them some better spears so that they don't struggle against the wildlife. At this rate, I might have to build another forge in the compound so that I don't have to keep borrowing the other side of Pop's forge. Jasmine laughed as she worked. He doesn't mind. He's always in a better mood when you've been over for the day, and he had someone competent to work with. The steam fitter only has half a clue, and it drives the old man insane. The steam fitter trade was more of an apprentice position to begin with, not focused on magitech or artistic craftsmanship, but on ensuring that steam vessels and lines didn't leak. They were the practical workers who made everything function, but they were not artisans. If you're good here, I will let you go. Remember, you can make the stable hands do the heavy lifting for you. Dominic left her tasks and walked into town. A walk that was no longer much of an open area, as the new housing development took up half the open area between the old village and the manor. The architect had tried to make them a bit more interesting, but they were still basic fieldstone rectangles with a tile roof on them. Well suited to the climate and the design of the rest of the town, but hardly interesting. However, Dominic noticed that the warehouse they were erecting for the factory was much more detailed. They had designed it with a smooth sandstone surface, which allowed them to do some basic details on the block work. It didn't match anything else, but it was a good-looking building, and it would be sturdier than fieldstone if things went wrong inside. The chances of an explosion making Magitech lights were very low, but the factory might not make the same products forever. Dominic had many more ideas for products that they could make, but all of them would have to wait until they had more skilled workers. Even if they cleared out every single techno-wizard looking for work, they wouldn't find enough unemployed workers insignia to staff a second factory. So, it was all up to who was unemployed and willing to move in Stantia province. And that was a huge unknown. If you added the populations of Limpsbury, Coster, and Wistfield, you had nearly 750,000 people. But the Dago's occupation had driven out most of their skilled workers, and it was unknown how many were going to be willing from wherever they had ended up to try starting over in Wistover. Oh, Lord Dominic, great timing. Can you come over here for a moment? Suni, their short and hairy architect, called from the factory's side door. Dominic jogged over to see what the man needed and followed him into the cavernous interior of the factory. There was a single row of stone pillars in the middle of the room, forming arch supports for the upper floor. It had been set 6 meters overhead, so the second levels would be the shorter of the two, closer to residential roof heights. But it wasn't intended to be a workspace. The second level was supposed to be nothing but catwalks and crane rigging, according to the plans. Are we anticipating larger products than lights? Dominic asked as he realized the building was being set up for heavy equipment. Well, it's like this, you see. We've been talking to the people around town, and then we calculated the space we had designed. What we realized was that we could run the whole production line for the lights and the fireplaces along that wall. See, we've already got them roughed in. That's the press for making copper sheeting from clay. The die presses will go there to cut rough shapes, and then the assembly stations. Then, starting from the far wall, we have the clay molds for the fireplace logs, then the blast furnace for firing the clay, and the painting stations, followed by the final assembly station, where the Magitech orbs made on the other side will be inserted and tested. But that efficient design left us half a building free. We can't get too many caravans here to move the goods, so there was no point in doubling the setup down the other side. But the carriage maker suggested that we put in some loading docks and storage space, then leave a portion for farm equipment parts making. There are some smithy apprentices in the last batch, and they've got traveling experience repairing steam carriages. So, we can start making parts and repairing the convoys that come to pick up goods from us, or even expanding the production of parts for the carriage maker, who is setting up his shop to make new tractors. His tone was getting more excited as he talked, and Dominic couldn't find an argument against his logic. The production line that he designed was very space efficient, and his math was right. They would be able to turn out hundreds of pieces a day. That was enough that even the wealthier guild members would struggle to afford buying them out with weekly convoys. Chapter 314. Changes approved. All right, I will approve the changes. Make that side a full-on tractor factory. The carriage maker is a small shop and never had room for more than one tractor at a time. If you use those 5 bays for the shop, then the end section for parts production and a forge, it still leaves us 3 doors to load trailers indoors and storage space at the far side. 5 tractors at a time might be optimistic, but if we make new ones in 2 bays, we can shift repairs and loading between the others as needed. I'm sure that the guild will be overjoyed to find out that we've got indoor parking for them when the rains start. Dominic decided. I will get right on that. But what I really wanted was for you to check the kiln design we set up for the clay logs. The techno wizard has a spell to dry the clay, but he's not a potter.
Suni explained.
We do have potters in town, but I know enough about the process to know that you just need to heat dry clay high enough to make it change. Did you want me to run it up? Dominic asked. The heating device isn't ready yet. I just need a review of the design. Dominic walked down the line and stopped at the large dome that was the furnace. The size is good, and you've built it out of 3 layers of brick. That should hold in enough heat with the outer clay layer to prevent leaks. The top looks like a mechanical vent. Dominic asked. It is. 20 centimeters of clay inside a steel housing, opened from the outside. It should hold heat well enough. It will take all night to fire the clay pieces, but we weren't planning to run 3 shifts anyhow. They didn't have enough workers for that, even if the factory supported it. I've got one more question. We've got all the right equipment here, but do you know anything about making canning jars? Dominic asked.
Sure.
If they've got enough lids, we can use the same line that makes the logs for the fireplaces to make jars. Glass is traditional, but obsidian is basically the same, though without the ability to see the contents. A simple change of spell orbs, and we could do canning jars and lids on this line as well.
Was there a need?
They're not a popular trade good. Dominic nodded. It came up a few days ago. It also doesn't need anyone to build Magitech orbs all day, so the line can start producing them while we train the factory workers. Harvest season is coming, and we will want as many as we can get so that nobody is short on stored food variety before next harvest. Suni nodded. I will relay that to the others. The old techno wizard will be happy to hear that we're not waiting on his training before workers can start getting paid. Most of the line only needs a few people. It's the stations making the Magitech orbs that make up almost all of the staff. And that can't happen until they're trained, which means everything is waiting on him to teach them the basics of Magitech engineering. Is the factory ready enough for them to start in the next few days? Dominic asked. Suni nodded. This side is ready for practical testing as soon as the Magitech is installed.
Almost anyhow.
We're still waiting on the hydraulic presses to die cut parts, but those should be ready soon. Pops is working on them now, as well as a steam hammer for the repair side. Perfect, I'm heading over to the forge to do some work today. I will check in with Pops while I work, so that he knows what's up. There's nobody better than him at making rare tools, so I'm sure that he's doing well with the parts for the factory. Dominic agreed. Suni smiled. In fact, they were his idea. We asked if he could make templates for a torch or something similar, and he suggested the hydraulic press with a cutting template. In theory, it should just stamp out a whole sheet of parts in a second, which will be good for all sorts of things once we get it up and running. All right, I will talk to you later. Good work, architect. Dominic made his way to the forge, which looked much more like a techno-wizard's lab today, with mechanical parts scattered everywhere. How's it going, old man? He greeted Pops as he walked in. Good timing. Grab the shovels from the storage room, and 3 rakes. Someone is coming over for them in a minute, and I'm busy. Pops replied. Dominic chuckled as he grabbed the tools from storage and set them out front. If there was one constant in the forge, it was Pop's reluctance to deal with the customers who actually commissioned the tools that he was making. Why he hadn't hired a front desk clerk was a mystery, but Dominic suspected that he didn't want anyone in his forge who didn't belong in a forge, and finding a good apprentice was no easy feat. He had worked alone for years before Dominic showed up, and now that Dominic had been promoted out of the forge, he was back to working alone again. A few minutes later, a girl pulling a cart stopped out front and waved to Dominic. My lord, it's a pleasure to meet you. Grandpa says you're a good boss, the girl declared. Dominic examined her more closely and realized that she was one of the Aelater family children, so her grandfather would be General Aelata, who was indeed an employee of the duchy. The job paid very well, and Dominic wasn't the demanding sort, but it was good to hear that he spoke positively to his family about his new lord. The loyalty of a skilled general was not easy to earn, and it took more than just skill to keep a duchy safe. Chapter 315. Presswork. Dominic helped the Aelata girl load the tools her family had ordered, and then served a few more bemused customers, enjoying everyone's shock at seeing him working the front counter of the smithy. Pops had all the larger parts of the press made, and now he was working on all the hoses, levers, and fittings that made it a functional tool. That took up most of the workshop, but Dominic just wanted to make spears, and that could be done in the far corner. While you're at it, heat that forge, and make me some tubing with a 2-centimeter inner diameter. I need it for the hammer, and it needs to be hot, so I can bend it to shape. Pops instructed. Got it. Thick wall or thin? Dominic asked. Make it thick. Those idiots are likely going to bash this thing half to bits, so I should make it as durable as I can. I've built it with a top-loaded double-sided hydraulic ram, so almost all the machinery will be up out of reach when they're using it. But that doesn't mean they won't find a way to break it. The dwarf side. Dominic chuckled. Well, we're going to get the line started with making canning jars and lids, since we're waiting on the Magitech orb team to be properly trained. So, they'll have some experience before they get into full production. If they can learn to safely make jar lids, they can learn to make the cutouts for the Magitech orbs without harming the tools. Should we put a warning label on it to remind them not to put their fingers beneath the hammer? Pops laughed. Already done. I stamped it into the frame so it doesn't wear off. I also put the cutting template on a sliding rack instead of a fixed bracket so they can slide the whole thing free to load a new sheet instead of putting the sheet under the hammer. That would certainly be slower, but it would be much safer for workers with too little common sense or too little training. Dominic started with the tubing, making the first batch so that Pops could make the fittings for it. Fortunately, Dominic had a steady hand, and there were minimal variances in the pipe, so Pops would only have to do a quick check and milling of the pipe end to ensure it was perfect before he flared it to hold the fitting and bend it to shape. Or the other way around. As Dominic realized once he handed the first few to Pops. It was easier to put the bends in, then slide the fittings on and flare the ends, then screw the pipe down. It was a deceptively simple process, but if your eye wasn't as keen as Pops was, you would have to do much more measuring to get everything perfect. While Pops fitted the pipes, Dominic made a few batches of spearheads and then more tubing for the hammer. The process left him plenty of time to finish his spears, and by noon he was ready to start upgrading the raw batches. You're getting good at that. 100 spears before noon. You know, if we had a few more reliable sorcerers, we could start a weapons factory. Pops joked. The king would love us. Or maybe hate us. Could go either way if we started sending out entire truckloads of weapons. Dominic agreed. We should start looking for adventurers, though. Once those soldiers that the prince brought start to identify the worst areas for monster infestations, someone is going to have to clear them. How long are they staying for? Pops asked. 1 month. Just long enough to tour the expanded territory and check for Dago's army remnants hiding in Signia territory. We've already found plenty, so they'll have their hands full. That's why I'm making them better spears. They're a reserve regiment, so they didn't have the best gear issued to them in the capital. The prince asked that I do some upgrades for them, but not pistols. Dominic explained. Pops sighed. Let me guess, he doesn't want a whole group of untrained reservists running around with guns once they get home? Dominic smirked. He's more worried about them harming themselves in combat with weapons they've never used before. The old dwarf laughed as he fit a tube to the hydraulic press. Well, that makes a lot of sense. There isn't time to train them how to work in a group and not end up shooting each other during an ambush or a reinforcement mission. It's safer to let them use the spears until they get home, if it's only 1 month. Dominic nodded and started to set the spears over the forge to get them heated for their final oil bath treatment. Pops was assembling the Magitech pump for the hydraulic press as Dominic worked on the spears. They had just settled into a rhythm when a young dwarven girl, in what Dominic guessed was her early teens, came in. Little one, what can we get for you? I'll pull it from the racks when I'm done this spear. Dominic called to the front room. I'm looking for work. My ma stopped at the Baron Keith's place yesterday, and she's going to be working there, but they didn't have a spot for me. The girl replied. Pops finished bolting the housing of the pump together, and then wiped his hands. You have any experience in the forge? He asked. Well, no. But I worked in a Magitech shop before we left Kynwyn. I am a dwarf, though. How hard can it be to learn to sell tools in a forge? She asked with a determined expression. Dominic smirked at Pops. She's got a point. Even I managed to learn to work the counter.
Pops winked at him.
All right, I will give you a trial, and then we can decide if you're going to work out here. Grab me 4 of the 3 mill bolts with stover nuts and the flashlight. The little girl frowned as she went to the bin and began looking for the right size. She got them on the first try, proving that either she knew how to measure or she could read Pop's labels. But the real test would not be getting the correct parts. It was holding the flashlight. Chapter 316 Mead. Dominic tried not to laugh at the nervous look on the girl's face as Pops took the bolts from her. Light the holes from the back, but don't shine the light in my eyes, he instructed. Dominic began hammering a few minor imperfections out of the spears, hoping to cover any laughter that slipped through. Shining the flashlight through the holes from the back, without it being in the eyes of the one installing the bolts, was nearly impossible. The girl was good, constantly adjusting the flashlight, so Pops could see that the holes were properly aligned, but not getting the light directly in his eyes as he moved around to install the 4 bolts. In fact, she was doing it better than Dominic did when he was holding his own flashlight. The girl was a natural. What's your name, girl? Pops asked as he took a wrench from his apron to tighten the bolts. My name is Mead. You know, like the breakfast drink. Pops chuckled. I do know the drink. It looks like you learn fast enough that you won't be in the way. How would you like to learn the ways of the forge? Or, are you happy at the counter? The girl's eyes lit up with joy. I would love to learn the forge, Master Pops. Then we will have to get you an apron. Until then, you can work the counter and help the customers. There are labels on everything, no discounts. Pop's announcement made Dominic smile. It was very nearly word for word what the old man had said the first day that he worked the counter in the smithy. With the spears heated, Dominic began the quenching process. He was constantly adding mana to the monster core-infused tempering oil, and Mead stood near the wall, intently staring at his work. So, that is how it's done. She realized. Pops shook his head. Not normally. But if you can do it, then it's the easy way to get magical weapons. Don't go spreading the news around. That's a trade secret right there. Mead smiled. Of course not, Master. But does that mean I'll be able to make magical weapons and tools too? Dominic winked at her, while Pops smirked at him. What he's about to say is stick to tools. Once you start making magical weapons, there will always be some reason that you need to keep making more. At one point, we even found ourselves drafted into the Royal Forge's Insignia City because they knew that we could make them. If you want to have a peaceful life in the forge, make tools. Dominic explained. Mead frowned. I thought that busy was good. The forge is always busy, girl. There is no need to worry that you'll run out of work. Just make the best tools that you can, and you'll have customers for life. Pops replied. Dominic leaned another freshly quenched spear against the wall and gestured to the front room. See, everything out there? All of that sells at least a few units a week. So, you'll need to learn to make every item on the shelves, and then later, you'll start learning to make the ones that are in the back rooms, and then the specialized tools and other items that come to the forge for repair or custom orders. There is no need to worry at all that you'll run out of things to do. Instead, you should worry that you'll run out of time in the day to get them all done. Most of the reason that Pops took me in was because he needed someone to work the counter so he could actually get his work done. But even if you're busy most of the day, there is plenty of time in the evening to help him make tools to restock the shelves. Mead was intently focused as she worked out some calculation, and Dominic laughed. There is an apprentice's room here. You can stay at the forge during the week while you're working. Just follow Pops around, and he will lead you to food at least twice a day.
Pops nodded.
We can't miss too many of Cook Beth's dinners. She might look a bit scary, but she won't turn away my apprentice if I bring her for dinner. The cook wouldn't turn anyone away if they showed up ready for dinner. That was just how she was. But she would happily chase you down to the showers if you showed up too filthy to be allowed at her table. The servants' break room was attached to the kitchen, and that was where common visitors and contractors would normally eat. Not that Dominic actually enforced it. If everyone was eating at the same time, they all just ate in the main dining room at the huge table. It was better than splitting them all up, and it let Alexis ask questions about how things were going around the house without anyone being able to lie. Or they could lie to her, but there was the distinct risk that someone would call them out if they had been shirking their work or hiding something. Dominic finished with the spears, then wiped the sweat from his face. Going through them so fast is more draining than actually having to hammer them from a block would be. But while they cool, I will go find Mead an apron from the tailor. They should have something available, he suggested. Pops nodded. Go ahead then. Get her something from yourself as well. It's traditional for the journeyman to give the new apprentice a welcoming gift. Dominic smiled at the smith. He knew just what to get the girl. She was about to receive a trade skill core, and she hadn't a single spot to equip it so that it would be properly visible. It would work fine in a pocket of the apron, as Dominic had done for a while, but as a master's apprentice, she could proudly show off her status with the trade skill core. Chapter 317. Gifts for the Apprentice. Dominic headed straight for the tailor's shop, as they should have everything that he needed today. Your Grace, what brings you in today? The Duchess' order won't be ready for a few more days. The tailor greeted him from the far side of the room, where he was arranging bolts of cloth. I will let her know. But that's not what brought me here. Master Pops is taking a new apprentice. So, I need a good leather apron for an adolescent dwarven girl and a bracer with a socket. Also, preferably leather and sized for a lady's arm. Dwarves are tougher than average, but she's still young, so her arms aren't going to be too thick for a while. Dominic explained. The tailor nodded, and his assistant ran off into the back room. They returned a moment later with a half-dozen aprons, most with ruffled silk trim. I think that you misunderstood. I need a leather apron for the forge, not a lady's cooking apron. Dominic explained. Oh, my apologies, Your Grace. But what about these? Are they inappropriate? The assistant held up a tray full of leather arm guards, the fancy sort that were normally used to hold a lady's dress sleeves on outings. No, I think those will be just fine. There are a few pairs there that will be proper for a lady of the forge. Dominic replied. Women's fashion always seemed to have long and wide sleeves, Dominic had noticed. But you could tuck those into the arm guards so you didn't get your dress dirty or tangled in your work. Alexis had plenty of similar items, but had learned to fight with her sleeves free so that she could respond if she was attacked at a formal event. Dominic picked a set that were dyed black, on the logic that black went with anything. It also helped hide the soot from the forge and tempering oil stains. For that reason, his black robes were his favorite. I will take these, and you can go look for appropriate aprons, he decided. The assistant ran out, then came back with a sheepish look and 2 leather aprons. My lord, these are the only ones we have in leather. They were both obviously made for adult human men, and far too long for any dwarf. But one of them was more slender, and shouldn't be too wide for the apprentice. Tailor, can you shorten this to dwarven height, and stamp the name Mead on the chest? Spelled the same as the drink. Dominic requested. The tailor bowed. Of course, my lord. The seamstress can do that right away. The tailor's wife came out with a smile and looked at the apron. You said this is for a girl? Indeed. Half a head shorter than Pop's and dwarven, so she's not going to grow too much. She's not as broad yet, but don't make it too narrow. Once she's hard at work in the forge, the muscles will fill in. Dominic agreed. The tailor smiled. There is no worse insult to a fine dwarven lady than to call her skinny. Dominic waited for a few minutes while the seamstress altered the apron, then stamped in a new design around the altered edges and added Mead's name to the top. That is perfect. I'm certain that she will love it. Here is payment, and I will see you again soon, unless someone else comes for the princess's order. The walk back to the forge was a quiet one, with nearly everyone at work at this time of day. There were a few people out shopping, but most were focused on trying to get the harvest in and the wet season crops planted before the worst of the rain started. Once that happened, it would be nearly impossible to work in the fields, especially the lower fields near the river, which would retain water much longer. Most of those were actually going to be flooded and planted with rice, which made it even more important that they were ready on time. Mead was working the counter and greeted Dominic with a welcome. What can we get for you today? Before she realized that it was him. Oh, Your Grace, welcome back. She amended. No need for titles in the forge. We're both Pop's apprentices, so you can just call me Dominic at work. He explained, then handed the apron to Pops. The old dwarf examined it carefully, checking the quality and suitability to be used in the forge, then nodded and held it out to Mead. Here you are. Your first smithy apron. We've seen everyone who placed an order in advance, so we can start restocking the tools. First up, we're making frying pans. Pops explained. Dominic smiled. That would be an interesting experience. And I have a gift for you. Every apprentice deserves to be able to show off their pride in their trade, so I got you something to hold your trade skill core once Pops grants you one. He explained as he held out the arm guards. Oh, those are lovely. They're even sized right for me. Mead gasped. Go ahead and try them on. It will keep your sleeves safe as you work. Making cast iron frying pans with Pops means both casting and forging a better surface, so you'll be working hard around hot iron. Dominic suggested. While Mead got changed, Dominic bundled up the spears he had created and put them in his storage cube for transport. Pops looked down at his new apprentice in approval, then held out a simple metal orb. Take that and give it some mana to speed up the attunement. Once that's done, we can get to work. He insisted, his tone gruff, but his eyes soft with fondness for the eager new apprentice. It took a few minutes, but eventually, the trade skill core gave a dim yellow glow. That was the sign it was active, and that Mead was considered a first-level apprentice, ready to start her formal training. Perfect. Now let's show you how to cast the pans. Lord Dominic, we will see you for dinner. Chapter 318. Would be nice. Dominic waved goodbye and made his way to the barracks, where the soldiers under Prince Russell were going through a training exercise, keeping their skills fresh before they had to go looking for monsters and Dago's invaders. Gentlemen, I have your upgraded spears. 100 units, all uncommon grade. Dominic announced as the officers turned to face him. Your Grace? Did I hear that right? One of the lieutenants asked. You did. I made you 100 uncommon grade spears. They're only level 5, but within military guidelines for a reserve regiment, and they'll be much better at their job if and when you do come across monsters in the patrol zone. While some close fighting is inevitable, if you can fight ogres from spear length, it is much safer. Dominic agreed. Thank you, Lord Dominic. The men are practically drooling over the opportunity. Prince Russell joked from the back of the group. Dominic looked at the spears they had arranged for inspection, and they were all level 1 common grade weapons, hardly worth calling magical. A high-quality knife would cut cleaner than them, and the design was the simple leaf-pattern spearhead, as opposed to the brutally serrated edges and longer head on the ones that Dominic preferred. The standard issue were a gentleman's weapon, suitable for parades and marching along the city walls. But the ones that Dominic made were what you actually wanted in combat. I will leave you to your training. I have some more work to get finished before the next caravan from the Merchants Guild comes along. The magitech that the duchy produces is the primary source of our income, and the demand is incredibly high. Dominic explained. Prince Russell nodded simply. I won't keep you. My men will head out on patrol tomorrow morning, as they now have their upgraded weapons. We will do the immediate area as well, with care not to bother the troll village. Then we will explore the western regions. Dominic nodded. I will speak with my wife later and see about taking a short trip to explore the east. It isn't known to have any threats, so if I can check it for squatters and remote peasantry, we can finish your mission here with far fewer trips. The prince shook his head. I will send a light cavalry unit east. They will be faster than you on foot. They are trained for surveying, and they will record the villages that they pass, inhabited or not. Where they come across intact buildings, they will check them for suitability to house new barons and untitled noble families. Keep in mind that while the peasantry of the Stantia province might be eager to move to your village, there are many younger sons who have earned war merits and are eager to ask for lands of their own. Dominic nodded. I eagerly await their arrival. I know that some of them are from larger branch families, so they will be coming with experience and trained help. That will go a long way to helping settle the region. I will warn you, though, there were never a lot of villages in this region. Signia might not have been openly hostile, but it was never on friendly enough terms with wavemates that they saw a need to build border villages and encourage trade. Prince Russell laughed. Oh, I remember. Despite my dear sister's assertions, I am old enough that I was already a junior officer when the Dago's Wavemates War started. This was the only border town, and it only existed because the Earl of Westover was doing a favor to the king and hosting political meetings between the two nations. That was a new tidbit of information that Dominic had not known. He rarely saw noble visitors to the manor, and didn't recall any of them having been from Signia. But given what he knew now, it was more likely that he was simply kept at home when they were present, so that nobody saw him and started asking questions. Are you expecting another caravan soon? Prince Russell asked as he sent his soldiers back to work. Dominic nodded. Every week or so. They've made this the primary route from the cities to Castle City, since we're the only inhabited spot in between. If you need anything, just make a note and leave it with the castellan. He was an accountant for the guild before we poached him, and he's got plenty of contacts to get what you need. The prince smirked at Dominic. And your town can make nearly anything that I might ask for. If you had a cavalry artificer to make new horses, you would be able to do a full resupply for passing military units. Dominic frowned. You have a good point. We should get one of those. We've got a carriage maker who is good with trucks and tractors, we've got techno wizards, a small mage tower that is still lacking elders, and pops in the forge to make everything else. Dominic also wouldn't mind learning how to make mechanical horses. They were a marvel of magitech engineering and far beyond his skills. But it was certainly something that he would love to learn to make. There was just something so much more elegant about the mechanical horses than a truck, or even an airship. Is that the goal? To make Westover into the hub of Magitech manufacturing for Signia? That's how Kynwyn was before the war, and they got fantastically wealthy from it. If you're aiming for the same, you might not have to worry about that 2-year deadline to build a successful duchy. You'll be worried about how much tax will be levied on you after those 2 years. Russell joked. Dominic sighed. You have a point. That production levy is going to hit us hard at this rate. But I'm sure that we'll do all right. With the factory in the duchy's name, we've got steady income, even without considering putting tax levies beyond the basic tithe. Chapter 319. Ahead of schedule. Prince Russell looked back at his troops. I should let you get back to your duties. I've got to get all these louts ready for their last mission before heading home from deployment, and if I don't watch them closely, they'll forget that we're still working soldiers. Dominic laughed and nodded in agreement. I should go remind my lovely wife that I do take my job seriously as Duke, and that I'm not just running off to play in the forge. The two men parted ways, and Dominic went to check on Alexis, who was in the library, napping in a comfortable chair. Perhaps he didn't need to feel too bad about the time spent in the forge. Carefully, he tilted the princess so he could sit beside her, then pull her up into his lap as he focused on enhancing his spellbook. That was the only major project for the day unless they got visitors, so there was no need to wake her up from her nap. At least until dinner was ready. Pops arrived right on time with meat at his side, and Dominic had to fight not to laugh at how nervous the little dwarf looked as she was introduced to everyone. Princess, this is Mead, Pop's new apprentice. She's on her first day, but she is showing good potential. Her mother is with Baron Keith, working at his estate. Dominic explained. Good evening, Apprentice Mead. It's good to have you here in Westover. The master smith has been looking for a reliable apprentice for a while, as his former apprentice keeps getting called away on other duties. Alexis greeted her. Mead giggled, then looked horrified, then bowed and apologized. Pop stood her back upright and patted her on the back. Relax a little. You can consider the forge to be a royal commission business. She's not going to bite your head off. That didn't help the girl look any less horrified, but when Jasmine and Millie came in from the servant showers, she did begin to relax. It's common for us all to eat together. The only ones who don't are the kitchen staff, who are busy and eat. Well, I don't know if they eat before or after. Dominic explained. After. The meal isn't ready in time for them to eat before. Alexis clarified. The farrier hustled the apprentice off to the far end of the table for some girls' talk, while Pops came to sit with Dominic and Alexis. Half the table was empty in between them, even with the royal guard seated, but that gave them a bit of privacy for their first meeting. So, you took in a little girl to be your new apprentice?
I didn't expect it of you, old man.
What happened to your notoriously picky standards? Alexis joked. Pops shrugged. She knows how to hold the flashlight. She will figure out the rest easily enough. Alexis smiled. All right, we won't say too much about your soft spot for the downtrodden. But will she be able to keep up in the forge? I know that the way you and Dominic have been doing things isn't quite the usual. Pops nodded. Oh, she will for sure. She might not be at the Duke's level, but she's a full-blooded dwarf. She will be able to work the forge just as well as I do once she has some years of practice under her apron. She's also right enthusiastic about making new tools. You should have seen how lively it got once we started in on the steam hammer for the factory. I'm going to end up making 2 of them now so that I can have one in the forge as well. His indulgent sigh made Alexis smile. How is the factory coming anyhow? We got the last of the major tools in today. The techno-wizards delivered the orbs for the kiln, and I made up a cutting die to make lids, so they'll be sending people over to start making canning jars tomorrow. Betty from the Witch Coven says that they've got a wax gum to seal the lids, so the harvest season won't be wasted. Pops explained. Alexis drummed the table with her fingers as she considered the potential. That will work out very well. But come to think of it, we're going to have far more than we need soon. Any word on the livestock so that we're not all vegetarian by the end of the month?
She asked.
Julio joined the conversation. The guild is bringing a convoy to us, along with ranchers. Technically, they're hired ranch hands, and we will put them on grazing land belonging to the duchy, but I have been assured that we will have a good mix of breeding stock. Excellent. We will wait for them, and that should solve our meat issue in half a year. Did they send milk animals? Alexis asked. Julio nodded. Water buffalo with calves. Not the best for cooking, but it makes wonderful cheese. There are sheep as well, and those will also be an option. Alexis smiled. Indeed, water buffalo milk was awful. It was a staple of farm households because the animals produced so much that even their own calves didn't need it all. But it was only good as an aged cheese. She had heard that once upon a time, the species had 3 to 4 calves at a time. But now it was more common for them to only have one, which left a huge surplus of milk production. Is there any other business for the week? If not, I will make plans to intensify the training of my staff. Alexis asked. Dominic smirked as the maid stood up a bit straighter. I will just be working on my magic and some new Magitech designs this week. Nothing that will need their assistance. He added. Pops shook his head. I will be back to normal orders tomorrow as we finish the order for the factory. Julio shrugged. Unless a caravan shows up early, it's just paperwork at my end. Then it settled. Enjoy your evening. Now, what did the lovely Miss Beth make for dessert? Chapter 320. Smiles and Berries. Prince Russell cast a glare toward the kitchen, and Dominic heard Beth faintly laughing. The cook loved to mess with the prince, but for formal dinner, all the portions should be identical unless a specific request was made. And that was how they came out. Mostly, Beth had made a form of lemon trifle with layered pastry, like a Danish. They were lovely, but Dominic couldn't help but laugh at the fact that the cook had arranged blueberries to make a smiley face on the prince's portion. The prince smirked, then shook his head when he saw it. When I was little, the lemon was too sour, so I asked for berries to make it sweeter. Now, she treats me like a child all the time. He muttered. Alexis smiled. It reminds us not to get an enlarged ego. Besides, don't you still prefer either berries or a berry jam on your lemon trifle? Russell shrugged as he cut a bite with one of the blueberries. I can't say that she's wrong, but she could space them evenly. Dominic reached into his storage and took out a small handful of dragonberries to make a circle on top of his dessert. The cook might be onto something. He informed the prince with a shrug as he tasted the combination. Dragonberries were also a somewhat sour fruit, but not in the same way as lemons, and the two flavors clashed in a most pleasing way. You keep berries on you, and don't share? Prince Russell asked. They're dragonberries. I would share, but that wouldn't end well for anyone else in the room. He explained. The prince blinked slowly. Right, those are native to the area. I forgot about that. My nanny used to use them in tea when I was sick, so I would sleep through the night. Alexis nodded. They're often used as a sleeping medicine, but apparently they have many medicinal uses. The witches on the edge of town collected most of them that were growing wild to make potions and medicine this year. You have a coven as well? Wistover really is blessed. Getting good, which brewed medicines, is a real pain. My territory is right along the West Kyria border, and they have plenty of mages, but very few witches, other than techno-witches. Dominic winked at him. I'm working on recruiting all the magic users I can find. Wistover might be small, but we could be a real powerhouse of Magitech production. I wish you the best of luck expanding the city, but I should retire early, as I am leading the men out first thing in the morning. Please have the staff send ingredients for breakfast to the barracks before dawn. Prince Russell announced. Certainly. The kitchen will ensure that they're properly fed before they leave. It might be the last decent meal that they had in some time, as the men of the reserve regiments were rarely skilled in cooking, and when they were drafted, the king didn't draft any women for the support roles, only soldiers. So, a bunch of young men who went from their mothers to their wives cooking suddenly had to learn to fend for themselves, while relying on the skills of the few bachelors in the group. After so long on deployment, they would have certainly learned some skills so that they could make the basic army rations a bit more palatable. But that wasn't anywhere near the level of meal that they would get from a ducal manor's kitchen staff. Once the prince was off to bed, the rest of the group slowly split off, except for Pops and Mead, who remained in the house. I am taking the day off to meet the apprentice's family and sign the formal contract, then show her around town. They just arrived a day ago, so she hasn't had a chance to get situated yet. He explained. That's a wonderful plan. The rooms on the first floor are made up for guests. Mead can stay there, and your room should be just as you left it. Dominic agreed. Mead smiled at him. You keep a room for your master at the manor? Dominic winked at her. Do you know how much an old dwarf can drink? Social drinks can be an all-night affair, and I can't be sending him home in the middle of the night. Pops shrugged. It's not that the town is unsafe, but it's a long walk in the dark. The town did have Magitech lights, but only the one in the town square by the fountain was normally left on, so that anyone who urgently needed water could access the public water pump. When the town got more populated, Dominic intended to put in a few more lights that would be on all night. However, the practice wasn't a popular one on most of the continent. The consensus was that they were thief lights. Just enough illumination for those with bad intentions to make their way around, but not enough to easily identify them, even if someone was up far past when they should normally have gone to bed. It was seen as a better option to turn all the lights out and let the guard dogs deal with security, as they didn't need any extra light. The bigger cities tended to have either gas lights or Magitech lights on most streets, as they operated all night. But smaller towns and villages were usually completely dark after the last businesses and taverns closed and shut their front porch lights off. Mead shrugged. I won't object to staying here for the night. I've never slept in a nobleman's house before. Just think of it. How many apprentices get to sleep in the same house as a real, genuine princess? Pops patted her on the shoulder. You've got a point. Now let's show you to your room. We'll be up at first light, so we can walk over and see your mother at work. It is Signia tradition that an apprentice's parents sign off on the work contract, so that they can't claim their child was kidnapped when they move to their new workplace.